You run a small operation alone or close to alone. Your competitors have teams. They have a project manager who chases the status updates, an ops person who handles the contracts and the invoices, a marketing coordinator who turns the calls into the proposals. You have you. The same week your competitor's team ships 4 client deliverables, you ship 1. Not because your work is worse, because your week is full of administrative work, the team-based operation has divided across 4 people. Here is the strategic move most solo operators miss. You do not need to hire to close that gap. You need to compete on a different layer. Roughly 80% of the work a small operation runs on is recurring. Same shape every week. Client intake on Monday looks like client intake last Monday. Friday status updates look the same as last Friday's. The team-based competitor's bandwidth advantage is real for ad hoc work and almost meaningless for recurring work because recurring work can run without a team. It can run on a file. In the next 13 minutes, I am going to show you the 4 files a solo operation runs every week, what to write in each, and how a Friday afternoon that used to cost you 90 minutes can cost you 10. The way I want to walk this. First, what is actually different between a team-based shop and a small shop in terms of where the time goes? Most people get this wrong. Second, the 4 files, one Claude.md at the top of your project that gives Claude Code consistent context about how you work. 3 skill files that handle the 3 biggest pieces of recurring admin: client intake, contract and invoice, weekly status. Each file gets walked. What goes in, what does not. One example you read on screen. Third, the honest limits. 4 places this stops working that nobody in the Make Money with AI cluster will tell you about. Fourth, the 4-block Saturday plan, 60 minutes total. The most common mistake, most solo operators look at the team-based competitor and think, I need to hire. They look for the budget for a part-time virtual assistant or a contractor or a junior. The math sometimes works, more often does not, and the hire takes 3 months to ramp up before they earn back what you paid for them. Here is what is actually true. The team-based shop is not winning because they have more people. They are winning because they have more process. Their project manager has a checklist. Their contract person has a template library. Their marketing coordinator has a swipe file of past proposals. The people are the consistency delivery mechanism. The actual edge is the process itself. If you can write the process down in plain English in a way that runs consistently every time you point it at this week's inputs, you do not need the people. You need the file. That is what a SKILL.md file is. 12 to 20 sentences in plain English describing how you do the recurring task, saved as a markdown file in your project folder, run by Claude Code on demand. You cannot compete with a team on bandwidth. You can compete on consistency, which is the part that actually matters for client trust. The strategic move is at the file layer. 4 files compress what a team holds collectively into instructions Claude Code executes the same way every time. One Claude.md gives Claude consistent context about your project. 3 skill files handle the 3 biggest pieces of recurring admin. Once they are in place, a Friday that used to cost you 90 minutes costs you 10. Here is the walk through the 4 files in order. File 1, Claude.md at the top of your project folder. This is the file Claude Code reads at the start of every session in your project. Treat it as the onboarding doc you would hand a new contractor on day 1. What goes in? 3 things. What? Your work, your tools, your typical project shape. Why? What you stand for, what you do not take on, what makes your work different. How? Your standard rate, your standard contract terms, your typical deliverable cadence, the names of the files you reference often. What does not go in? Personality instructions like be a senior consultant or think like a top-tier strategist. Claude already knows how to think, and stuffing the file with directive language wastes context. Vague platitudes, novella length backstory, and nothing project-specific to one client. That gets confusing when you work with multiple. Keep this file under 80 lines. Past 80, Claude starts ignoring parts. File 2, the client intake skill, path, a folder called .claude/skills/client intake. Inside that folder, a file called SKILL.md, the job. Take a discovery call you just had, your notes, the prospect's email thread, the prospect's website if you skimmed it, and produce a working proposal. Scope, cadence, rate, first invoice timeline. What to write? The front matter at the top, 3 dashes, then a name and a description, then 3 dashes. The description matters. It is what Claude reads to decide whether to load the skill. Be specific about when this fires. Use this skill when the user pastes discovery call notes or says, turn this call into a proposal. Below the front matter, in plain English, walk the steps the way you would teach a junior. What inputs you need? The structure of the proposal, your standard scope section, your cadence section, your rate section, your tone, your 2 opening sentences, your closing line about next steps. What not to write? One-off custom logic for a specific prospect, anti-patterns Claude already knows. Code, syntax, anything that reads like programming. This is plain English instructions for a recurring task. File 3, the contract and invoice skill, same shape. Folder at .claude/skills/contract and invoice with a skill.md inside. The job, take a verbal handshake, agreed scope, agreed rate, agreed start date, and produce a signed ready contract draft, a first invoice, and a project folder structure on your computer. 3 outputs from 1 input. What to write? Your standard contract terms, your invoice numbering convention, your payment terms, your project folder structure, what files live where, what naming convention you use, the exact path to your contract template if you have one. What not to write? Legal advice, tax advice, industry-specific compliance terms unless you have already had a lawyer sign off on them. Treat this file as the operational shape of your work, not the legal foundation. The legal foundation comes from your real contract template, which Claude refers to. File 4, the weekly status skill, folder at .claude/skills/weekly status with a skill.md inside. The job, Friday afternoon. You have the project tracker, the shared notes, the email thread, and last week's status doc. Produce a 1-page status update the client reads in 3 minutes Monday morning. What to write? The structure your client expects. The headline format, the bullets, the action items, your tone. The closing line about next week's prep. The 2 sentences you always start with. Every status doc opens the same way for consistency. What not to write? Performance language about how the week was. The status doc reports facts. The strategy is in the conversations, not the doc. Now here is the move that turns 3 files into a layer. Each one produces an output the next one consumes. Client intake produces a proposal. The proposal becomes the input to contract and invoice. The contract and invoice produces the project folder. The project folder becomes the input to weekly status. By month 2, you point Claude at the weekend's inbound, and 10 minutes later, you have a proposal, a contract, and a project folder ready to go. By month 3, your Friday is a single command that runs weekly status across every active project at once. This is the compounding move that closes the gap with team-based competitors. They cannot run the same week twice consistently because each person on the team has their own slight variation in how they do the work. You can. The skill file does not have a bad day. It does not forget what the standard contract terms are. It does not write the status update at 4 p.m. Friday in a hurry. It runs the same way every Friday, and every Friday what comes out is consistent because what goes in your file is consistent. The team's bandwidth advantage was real when the work was bespoke. The team's consistency advantage was always a story. The actual consistency lives in the process they shared, and now you have written that process into your file. So the team has people. You have a file that does not have a bad day. For recurring work, the file wins. This is what real solo operators are already doing. A pet-sitting business owner named Steve organized hundreds of pet photos through Claude. Reference image matching, per animal folders, automated file renaming, solving an organizational bottleneck that used to swallow his Sundays. A solopreneur writer named Daria Kupareanu, who runs a newsletter called AI Blew My Mind, took monthly bank reconciliation from a full afternoon of manual matching to automated processing with missing document flagging. The framework she names: point Claude at a folder, describe the outcome, receive finished deliverables without step-by-step babysitting. The pattern in both cases: concentration of decision making at the operator, automation of execution at the file layer. I want to be honest about where this stops working. First, real-time client communication. If your value add is you on calls, in meetings, in the actual conversation with the client, no skill file replaces that. Claude Code is not for synchronous human work. The administrative wrap around the human work, that is where the time savings live. Second, high judgment one-off work, strategy decisions, hiring or firing, major pricing changes, big creative pivots. Claude Code helps you think but does not decide. The decision is yours, made on the human side of the work. Third, multi-stakeholder alignment. When the work is the meeting, 5 people in a room hammering out a trade-off, no SKILL.md replaces being in the room. Use Claude Code for the prep and the follow-up, not the alignment itself. Fourth, regulated work that needs audit trails. Healthcare records, regulated finance, HIPAA, SOC 2. Claude Code on the standard plans is not configured for that. You need Claude Enterprise with the right setup, or you need a different tool entirely. What this is for: recurring administrative work in a small operation run by someone who is also delivering the actual client work. That is most of the time, but not all of it. Be honest about which is which. Here is the 4-block Saturday plan. 60 minutes. Block 1, 15 minutes. Open the project folder where you do the most recurring client work. Type Claude, type /init. Claude analyzes your project and produces a starter, CLAUDE.md. Read it, delete the personality lines if any. Keep the what, the why, the how. Trim under 80 lines, add your standard rate, your standard contract terms, your deliverable cadence. Block 2, 20 minutes. Pick the one recurring admin task that costs you the most time. For most operators, the answer is the weekly status update. Create a folder at .claude/skills/weekly status. Inside, a file called SKILL.md. At the top, 3 dashes, then name : weekly status, then description : then a sentence describing when Claude should load it. 3 dashes again. Below, in plain English, walk the steps. What you pull in, what the structure looks like, your tone, save. Block 3, 15 minutes, run Claude in your project. Point it at this week's project tracker, this week's emails, last week's status doc. Say one sentence. Run the weekly status skill on these inputs. Watch Claude draft. The first draft will not be perfect. Read it, find the gap, add 2 sentences to your skill file describing how to fix the gap. Block 4, 10 minutes, run it again. This time, the output is right. You spend the remaining minutes editing 2 sentences. Send. By Saturday lunch, you have one recurring admin task that used to cost you 90 minutes running in 10. Next Saturday, write a second skill. The Saturday after, a third. Inside a month, your Friday is a single command. The solo operator, Claude Kit, is the link in the description, free download. Inside the folder, the 4 files exactly as I just walked them: 1 CLAUDE.md template, 3 SKILL.md files for client intake, contract and invoice, weekly status. Drop the folder into your project, customize the templates, run Claude. The same link gives you the 50 AI business ideas list. If you want feedback on the 4 files you wrote, I run a free community called Agent Skills Academy. Half the room is over 45 and running solo operations. Drop your CLAUDE.md in the Foundations channel and I will read it. What is the one recurring admin task in your week that you would hand to a skill first? Comment Timophone and tell me in one sentence. I read every comment. You do not need a team, you need a file.